Hello, welcome to my shed. On this episode of Building the Arcade Machine, we are going to be looking at the electronics and hopefully going through the wiring and what's required software wise, what's required hardware wise, and all that sort of thing. We're going to wire the buttons up, we're going to wire the coin slot in, we're going to see what we can do with backlighting, see what we can do with everything else, and go from there. As you can see, we've put some wires onto the control panel. We've wired up the buttons to each of the boards. The boards have been hot glued in place, and we've also ran a circuit around for each of the LEDs. Let's have a closer look at that. So on the right hand side we have the contacts for the LEDs, and we have a circuit that goes around each of the buttons. So each of the LEDs is in parallel, and then on the left hand side we have the actual button that takes a wire back to the board, so that the board can register the button press. The LED, the lighting circuit, we've got one for each side, comes through round and into this chocolate box connector, so that we can actually connect from here back down into the drawer where we can draw power from the USB. Joystick, of course, is connected. There's a 5-way connector from the joystick onto the board. We'll also be connecting these 4 additional buttons back down onto the board, so that we have the ability to do the auto, clear, turbo and mode, because we haven't quite figured out exactly what those do, and those will wire back down and give us the extra buttons in the drawer in the control panel, the sub control panel. In the drawer we have the Raspberry Pi itself. That's powered from a USB hub from a company called Pi Hut, specially developed to allow you to power the Raspberry Pi through the USB and without any sort of backfeed problems. We've got a keyboard for talking to the Raspberry Pi, and that's connected in here. If you can just see that through a wireless connector. There's a mouse, TV remote control if we need it. Over here we've got the soundboard, the amplifier rather, and that's connected in through the 3.5mm jack here. This is the USB cable. This is the power from the USB hub, and we've got an external USB thumb drive here. The operating system and everything else is on a micro, mini, whatever it is, SD card in the Raspberry Pi. So the plan is to, somewhere over here, we're going to have a sub control panel which will allow us to press buttons, and that'll be connected through a detachable connector up into the main control board. It'll also include the buttons on the side and allow them to interface with the boards as well, like normal buttons. So we open the door, and inside that we've got the coin op system. That's got its own 12-volt power supply. We've got the main 6-way power adapter. So we've got the marquee lights, we've got the TV, we've got, which one's that? That's the HDMI, that's the hub, that's the USB hub. This one is the backlights, and this one is the coin op. So it's quite a lot of power going on there, but it's all sort of 12 volts or thereabouts. The only 240s down here. That's fine. We've got this coin operation thing is, it was cheap and it works, but it's supposed to be completely configurable to 3 different coins and outputting 3 different pulses when you switch it, when you put a coin in, but something's a bit peculiar with it. It still works, you can put coins in and it sends the right thing, but it's not very good. I think it's probably worth the money that we paid for it, which was about 10 quid. So what you can't see back here, there's a tiny little white thing here. This is the remote control sensor for the backlights. So the backlights, we just move you around, So you can just about see the strip of LEDs here. This is the remote control sensor just out of shot, and it comes off, the power comes into there and splits off, so you've got the controls. Now that power, the negative for that power comes split out and goes back up to the switchboard, the sub control board at the top. So when you switch the switch, that turns the power on and off, and these LEDs will go out back and tape round the back of the machine, so when it's up against the wall you get a nice fancy colours up against the wall. This here is the cable for the coin slot, so when you put a coin in, the coin machine slot thing sends a pulse down this cable, and we can turn that on and off from the sub control board. If it's turned on, then that pulse goes up to the USB board and behaves just like pressing a switch. Right, the sub control panel, which is what I'm calling it, it's got 5 switches on it, and those switches connect back. It also connects in the side button, so the side buttons run in, they connect into this connector block at the back, and then go up through these this 25 pin connector up to the USB board, and that like normal buttons. So the lights come in at the back, and the switch connections come in the back, 4 for each side. On the side here we've got the coin slot operation and the backlights. So these switches, one of them controls the lights for the buttons, one of them controls the backlights on and off, the other one controls whether the coin slot's on and off operation, and these two at the bottom can control whether or not the front buttons on the arcade machine are functional or not. So this will break the circuit on those buttons. Still got to label those up. So the button operation, when you press the button, the circuit comes down this wire through this switch, and then back up this cable, and by turning these on and off you can interrupt those buttons and stop them from working, which is handy when you want to just use the coin slots. So that ribbon cable comes up into this horrible connector here, and then is distributed off to each of the boards. So the connections for these buttons here come down through this connector, feed down here to the switch. If the switch is on, then the signal goes all the way back again and feeds back into the board. Same for the other side. We've got power for the lights for each of the buttons here, and that is about it. Not much more to it than that. Made some horrible mistakes along the way. Tried to wire these button lights into series so that when you pressed them, the lights would come on, but the USB power, this particular USB power board is not man enough for the job. The one I built previously, actually that was a feature of the buttons and allowed you to do that. This one doesn't, so the lights are operated via the switch in the sub control board, so it's a separate issue. So main boots up into we've got RetroPie. On the Raspberry Pi we've got a version of Linux called RetroPie, and that contains a whole set of emulators, one of which is MAME, and we can load different ROMs for arcade games on that, and they load in this emulator called MAME for All. You actually get a choice as to what emulator you can use. MAME for All works on most of them. So the machine boots up. The arcade machine is now Defender, one of my favourites. Okay, we put some money into it. Okay, let's start again. Not very good at it. Oops, shouldn't kill them. Oh yeah. Yes, well, Defender never one of my favourites, but I was never very good at it. Now we can come out of that game, we can come into lots of others. Depends what you can load and what you load, what you can get. The other, we can go sideways, and we've also got all the configuration for RetroPie, what you actually need to do. Well, that's the arcade machine finished. Wow, that was a long one. It's taken a while, it's been complicated, and we made some stumbles along the way, but it's finished, and all that remains now is for my friend to pick it up, and we should have a few shots of it in action in his house, if they'll let me film there. So, thank you so much for joining me on this journey building this arcade machine. It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed it a lot, and just need to get it out of my shed so I can get on with the next thing. Thank you so much, and I'll speak to you next time. Thank you.